In this tutorial, we're going to go over how to create a drawing of the Titan 86L. Let's first take a look at the Titans of CNC drawing, as we are going to be using this as a reference to create our own drawing. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our front view here with a couple dimensions on it. Following the rules of third angle projection, to the right of this will be our right-handed view. And then to the bottom right here is an isometric view, giving us some further clarification of what the part's going to look like. Coming back to our front view, we see some section lines that are dividing our part in half here. And because the arrows are pointing up, we're going to be using this section of our part, the upper section. And we're going to drop that section down here as a bottom view. Notice in our bottom view here, we have the vast majority of our measurements located on our part. Let's jump over to Fusion 360 and let's create our drawing. When we drew this part, we used the left-handed rule where our z-axis is always facing up, our x-axis is always pointing to the left and right, and then our y-axis is always going forward and back. The issue is with that in mind, this view right here is actually considered our front view, and we can see that right up here in our view cube. Well, I need to tell Fusion 360 which side of my part is actually going to be considered my front view. That way when we create our drawing, that view will state correctly. So according to our drawing, notice our groove in here, this perspective is actually our front view, with the groove facing up towards us. So I'm going to kind of orient my part over here like this, and then notice my view cube over here. It says that this is my left-hand view. I'm going to click on where it says left. Yours could say right, you could say something else, but you are going to click on it. Then I'm going to come up to the little house up here right above our view cube, right click on it, and we are going to set our current view as our front location. Notice when we do this, our view cube has changed, and now that is indicating that that is the front of our part. We're going to save this now, and then we're going to change our workspace. We're going to go from design into our drawing workspace. In our pop-up window here, it's asking, do you want everything in your modeling workspace to be a part of your drawing? Yes, we do. We are creating a new drawing here, and the template that I'm going to be using is a template that we referenced from another video that we've previously created. After you choose that, press OK. And it's going to bring your model into the drawing workspace. In our pop-up window here, we're going to change our style to visible edges. And I'm going to type in a custom scale here of 3:1 because I want my part to be a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to place my front view in our upper left-hand corner and then press OK in the pop-up window. Now that we have our front view here, we're going to add in our right view and our isometric view. We're going to go back to drawing views, over to projected. We're going to reference off of our front view here, dragging our mouse to the right, clicking there and dragging our mouse to the right and down a little bit, and that will give us an isometric view. Clicking again and then press enter on the keyboard. I'm going to change my isometric view from a wireframe into a shaded part by double left clicking on it and changing its style to shaded with visible edges only and closing that out. I'm going to change my right-handed view style because we're missing some lines geometry here that makes up this fillet. So I'm going to double left click on it, and I'm going to turn our tangent edges to full length, And notice when I did so, we get a little preview of what that's going to look like. And I'm going to close that out. I'm going to move back to my front view. And now we're going to add in that section view. We're going to go to drawing views and down to section view. I'm going to click on the front view here. I'm going to gesture my mouse over to the center here. And notice when I just leave my mouse cursor there, we get a little pop-up window that says that is the center. I'm going to move my mouse over to the left and you'll see this green dashed line appear. I'm going to left click at this location, dragging my mouse over to the right hand side, left click again, and then press enter. This will create our section lines here. I'm going to drag this section view down about this location and then press OK. Now that we have our views landed on our drawing, we're going to take a look first at this bottom view. I'm going to zoom in here. The very first thing that we need to do is add in some geometry so we can reference off that geometry for our dimensions. We're going to come up to our toolbar where it says geometry, and we're first going to add in a center line. I'm going to click on the two lines that make up this bore in the center of our part. Afterwards, I'm going to right click and press OK, and that will get us out of that mode. I want this endpoint of this center line to be snapped to the top of our part. I'm going to click on it, and then you'll see this grayscaled arrowhead here. I'm going to click on that arrowhead. I'm going to drag my mouse up till I see an endpoint box. And I'm going to drag my mouse over to where those two entities intersect. And you'll see some construction lines appear as you do this. And we're going to left click at that location, and that should terminate our line right on the edge of our part. After we do this, we're going to add in some edge extensions. We're going to go back to geometry, down to edge extension. What we're going to do is we're going to take these lines here, and at some point these two lines will intersect. So I'm going to click on these two lines, and notice we see that intersection point here, and we're going to repeat that over on the other side. Now that I have my geometry in place, now we're ready to add some dimensions in. We're going to go up to our toolbar where it says dimensions and down to ordinate dimension. The very first thing we need to do is we need to land a datum location here. Our datum is going to be on that center line right on the top of our part. And I'm going to drag my mouse up, setting our 0 location. I'm going to come over and land my other 0 location, referencing one of the endpoints on the top of our part. This time dragging my mouse over to the left hand side. Now that we have our datum locations landed, I need to change the annotations of our sheet. In the bottom center of our workspace here, we have annotation settings. We're going to left click on this. We're going to check the box next to display trailing zeros. And then we're going to change our linear dimension precision to the thousandths column. So 1, 2, 3. And notice by doing this, we now get 3 trailing zeros here for our datums. We're going to double left click on these locations and change our primary precision to read just 0. I'm going to repeat that over here on that 0. Now that we have our datum landed and we updated our annotation settings, we're going to add in the remaining balance of our measurements. We're going to go back to ordinate dimensions, and we're going to start clicking on some of the endpoints that make up this geometry. So the endpoint here for this bore, and then I'm going to gesture my mouse over to the extension line from our 0 location, and I'm referencing off of the end of it. That way I can get everything in alignment here. Then I'm going to go to where this groove is at. Same thing, I'm referencing off of that extension line. Down here where our edge extensions were. Again, we're referencing off of the previous extension line and then the outside of our part. Now that we have the horizontal measurements in, now we're going to start adding in our vertical measurements. We're going to come on the top of our groove here. Same thing, we're referencing off of the previous edge extension here. Then to this point here. The bottom of our groove. The center location of these edge extensions. This point here. And lastly, the bottom of our part. Now that we have our ordinate dimensions in place, we're going to add some other dimensions in here, further clarifying some features. We're going to go D on the keyboard or up to dimensions and down to dimension. Very first dimension that we are going to add in is across the diameter of our part. So I'm going from line to line. I'm going to click here. Then I'm going to go inside this groove from line to line again. This next dimension that I'm going to add in is from the center location of these intersections to the center of the other intersection. And then lastly, the diameter of our bore. Afterwards, we're going to right click and press OK. That will get us out of the dimensioning mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of move some of my measurements around. And I'm going to put some extension lines extending over to the right hand side of our part. That way we get our dimensions off of the part itself. It's a good opportunity too, if your dimensions kind of jumped off the part, you can actually kind of realign them at whatever location you'd like to. We need one more dimension on here. We're going to add a clarification dimension for the width of our groove here. So back to dimension. We're going to click on the top of the groove and then the bottom of the groove. We'll land our measurement kind of in the center here. Afterwards, right click, press OK. That gets us out of dimension mode. And then we're going to drag an extension line up and off the part, like so. I want to change these dimensions over here to a diameter dimension. To do so, I'm going to double left click on it. And I'm going to put my cursor in front of the bracket here. And I'm going to insert a symbol. And the symbol we are going to use is the GD&T symbol for diameter. And then close that window out. I'm going to repeat this on the remaining balance of the measurements. Like so. Now that we have our bottom view fully defined, we're going to come up and take a look at our front view now. Our front view's just got two dimensions stated on it. This time we're going to go to dimensions and down to diameter dimension because we're dealing with circles here. I'm going to click on the innermost circle here that makes up the bore, dragging our mouse up. Then we're going to click on the outermost circle and again drag our mouse up like so. Our front view is now fully defined. I'm going to jump over to our right view. In our right view, we're going to go D on the keyboard or dimension down to dimension. This one we're going to click on this radius here and drag our mouse up. And our last dimension that we need to add in is dimensioning these chamfers here. This one I'm going to use a text with a leader. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to click on that angle right there, that angled line. Drag my mouse up. And I'm going to type in my chamfer dimensions. I'm going to insert the degree symbol here. Like so. Afterwards, I'm going to close this back out. And that added in our chamfer dimensions. Very last thing that we're going to do on this print is we are going to update our title block. We're going to jump down to our title block here. We're going to double left click on the lines that make up the title block. This will enable us to be able to alter the attributes. We're going to alter the material attributes here. We are going to be using 6061 T6 aluminum to make this part. We're going to move over to our revision block, and this will be revision A. Afterwards, we're going to press OK in our edit window, and we're ready to save this drawing. This concludes the quick tutorial on how to create a drawing in Fusion 360 of the Titan 86L.